Frankfurt School predicted superhero fatigue in the 1930s, and I'm going to tell you why. So the Frankfurt School was active in the 1930s and 40s in reaction to fascism in the West, and especially Germany. In between World War I and World War II, new technology has been commercialized, which meant that there was an influx of media which theorists Horkheimer and Adorno had dubbed the culture industry. The problem with this was that there was so much content that it became repetitive and profit-orientated rather than a form of artistic development. Another Frankfurt theorist, Benjamin, agreed, and he saw that this copying of art across mediums to reach larger audiences he saw as devaluing what he called the aura of art. The oversaturation of content in the culture industry kept audiences passive and distracted from political motivations, thus removing art's ability to be a form of political resistance, which was a Marxist belief that the Frankfurt School believed in. Key issues that the Frankfurt School theorized from this expansion of the culture industry involved the politicization of art and its ability to be wielded by governments and elites as means of protecting national ideology, propaganda, and cultural hegemony. In my opinion, the theories of the Frankfurt School are still significantly relevant today due to the exacerbation of consumerism in the post-World War boom and the globalization in the 21st century. However, where previously the culture industry promoted countries' individual nationalistic goals and ideologies, is now used to uphold a more generalized Western culture and hegemony. This coincides with a larger shift in global power structures. Superpower used to be defined by military and economic power, whereas now it's much more dominated by cultural influences such as the media landscape to maintain influence. The culture industry plays a huge role in this, thus sustaining the relevancy of the Frankfurt School's theories today, even in a vastly different media landscape.
In The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception, written by Adorno and Horkheimer, they argue that culture is essentially always the same content on different mediums. Even political polar opposites can follow the same rhythm as a means of controlling their audiences and their money. A good example is the superhero genre, which spans across so many different mediums, including TV, film, comic, video games, all of which make creators like Marvel, DC, and Hollywood so much money through box office success, expansion packs, and copyrighted characters and titles. The different mediums open up new merchandise opportunities to make even more profit. A specific example of this being the 2017 Lego Batman movie, which was used to promote Lego Batman toy sets. Therefore, the superhero genre as a whole espouses Horkheimer and Adorno's beliefs that the genre upholds consumerist ideologies and reinforces the capitalist hegemony, which keeps the masses passive by entertaining them at all times with the same content across every medium. In terms of politics and political control through the media, comic books and the superhero genre has always been a political reflection of the world around us. World War II covers included graphics of Captain America punching Hitler and Batman and Robin helping soldiers out. During the Cold War, Superman was portrayed as the sole survivor of nuclear fallout, and new superpowered characters such as the Hulk reflected the contemporary scientific experimentation. In more recent history, alien characters have been an allegory for othering and immigration rights. Obviously, the politics have changed over time because of changes in political and cultural hegemony. For example, in the 1950s, Batman was seen as becoming too queer, as he, Robin, and Alfred lived in an all-male sphere with little to no female love interests. This camp subtext led to a moral panic in the currently homophobic society, who worried that their impressionable young children would be influenced by such themes. This led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority in 1954, whose stamp comic book producers had to follow strict moral content guidelines in order to get it printed on their work. This highlights that comic books were used in a way to spread national ideologies, and at some points, like in the Second World War, as a form of propaganda for young people. In addition, the fact that the same flagship characters such as Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman have existed in media since the Second World War, having simply been transferred to different mediums to keep up with audiences' changing habits, espouses Adorno and Horkheimer's belief that content no longer needed to label itself as art, because the characters had already got an audience which guaranteed them profit, rather than creating new characters and new stories that would enrich the art form. When Adorno and Horkheimer were writing, the radio was the up-and-coming medium in the media landscape, which added to the passivity of audiences in receiving subpar content because there was no method of response. Whereas now, with social media as a place to discuss the culture industry openly and actively, we've realised that there is too much superhero content in the media landscape. The term superhero fatigue has been used to refer to the oversaturated market, especially as Marvel's box office success continues to drop since the release of Avengers Endgame. However, the cycle of repetitive superhero content continues as critics cast Marvel aside for the regeneration of James Gunn's new DC universe, following the relative success of Superman 2025, which highlights that we as an audience are still passive and unable to free ourselves from the grips of Hollywood and the superhero industry. Walter Benjamin argued that the copying of art into new mediums makes it more accessible to the masses but weakens its aura and artistic value. thus saying that flashy new technologies distract people from the true meaning of art. From a superhero point of view, the special effects, gore, profanity and action of The Boys 2019 distracts people from its political subtext even in its most overt form. The Guardian commented on the fact that right-wing Boys fans were shocked to find out that Homelander was a critical take on republicanism and Trump, even though it had been obvious since episode 1. The Boys started out as a satirical critique of the superhero genre and its capitalist ideologies of the superhero industry and American culture itself, with the superheroes being little more than actors and the show's antagonists. It critiques the consumerist nature of the genre, including merchandise and spin-offs. Ironically, The Boys has just confirmed its third spin-off, becoming the very thing it sought to condemn. An example used by Benjamin was the shift from painting to photography and how the appreciation of art changed from the talent behind creating it to the message and the meaning behind it, while warning of the commodification of art, making it something to have rather than to appreciate, and making the context behind the moment more important as well as the reflection of its time in history. In present media development, the change from comic books to movies and modern media can devalue illustrators' artistic intentions which reflected the character's story. For example, Henry Cavill's Superman suit fits the washed-out contemporary aesthetics of the time, but removes the hope, light and kindness that Superman's bright suit does in the comics. In addition, the change to gritty Batman movies set in realism makes certain fantastical plots and villains such as Killer Croc, Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze unviable due to them not being as grounded in reality. However, to disagree with Benjamin, digital media is more easy to access and social media enriches fandom by drawing people in. From popular movie adaptations, fandom can build and give respect to characters and world building, and it can demand certain content from creators, thus limiting the control of elites. And if more people can recreate art through fan fiction, fan art, does it weaken the importance of the official channels of superhero media? Does it limit us to established characters? And to go back to Adorno and Horkheimer's argument about the repetitivity of certain characters and stories, I do have to mention certain exceptions such as the Spider-Verse animations and the Batman Arkham games. Both were artistically acclaimed and changed their respective mediums for the better, suggesting that characters, despite being overused and pre-established, it doesn't always necessarily devalue the art form, and in some cases can revolutionize it as well. It wouldn't have been financially viable to make these games and these movies without the use of pre-loved characters which have guaranteed profit, because it wouldn't have been financially viable. This devalues Horkheimer and Adorno's belief that certain mediums no longer have to present themselves as art, because these were artistic strides. For the transferal of the characters from page to screen isn't necessarily bad for artistic development, because it allowed for the exploration of new forms of art, just how modern day remakes reflect modern special effects, storytelling, aesthetics and morals, just as well as their monetary gain. Tim Burton's 1989 Batman revived comics' popularity at a time where they were in decline, by respecting their comic book backstories, details and characters, allowing the genre to develop and reach new audiences. Without that, it wouldn't have progressed to where it was today. The formation of fandom in the public sphere also allowed for active audience participation in stories and characters, adding more depth to the smaller characters and forming spaces for social and political discussion through lenses of stories, characters and world building for free.
So overall, we needed superheroes in their prime. They reflected society around us in light of conflict, development and experimentation. However, just as the Frankfurt School argued, it went too far and for too long, to the point where heroes don't resonate with us anymore, and that superhero content is just seen as a symptom of capitalist ideologies. The fact that superhero fatigue is realised in public conscious and that people want new stories that shift from the current industry suggests that we're not as passive as the audiences were in the 1940s, and that the expansion of the contemporary media landscape, specifically social media, will change the culture industry for the better by taking power out of the hands of the elite in the future. In terms of Benjamin's argument, while the copying of content from comic books to the big screen does lose a certain magic of the original artistic development, it also allows for the experimentation of new art forms which have a positive impact on creative industries while sustaining the popularity of superheroes among people who don't read comic books, which nowadays is a lot higher. However, it ultimately does agree with the Frankfurt School's theories in that different mediums share the same content, and in contemporary media it seems that the comic book industry and movie industry rely on each other to keep each other alive.